Hi, welcome to the Big Bang of Data Science. So we are at the book analysis from the start to the end. I hope you have landed into this book after you have accomplished the first book, Research from the start to the end, where in this book we're going to have a complete focus on the analysis part of your data. Let's go ahead and review the chapters of this book. Well, first in chapter 1, we're going to have a quick introduction. We're going to be covering the research map, and then we'll be looking at the threats to conclusion validity. Following that, we're going to be looking at statistical power, then improve conclusion validity, and finally, we'll be looking at analysis. Let's go ahead and see what is in the research map. So in this outline research map, we're going to actually be looking at the main element or the component of research map that include the question, the structure, the design, the plan, the instrument design, the test of measurement, and then the operationalization. Of course, if you have already accomplished the first book, that is research from the start to the end, you should be familiar with all the elements in here except the operationalization, which is going to discuss the details of the data. Next, we'll be looking at the next outline of threats to conclusion validity and why it is important to understand the concept of validity at the first place, because when you have data, you need to make sure that the kind or the establishment of data it's actually valid. Then we will be moving to the statistical power. In this, we are going to establish the idea of understanding two different kind of hypotheses. What does it mean, a true false and false true hypothesis within the range of actually what you have concluded and what is the reality, and how you can actually estimate that through two important measures of alpha and beta. Then we'll be looking at how you can improve the conclusion validity. There are certain important actually measurement or factors that you might want to consider while you're looking at the validity to your data. And finally, of course, we'll be looking at the analysis part. In this, we're going to discuss an important three elements, and that is the preparation and the descriptive model, and finally the inferential model. And of course, we're going to be also curving into the general understanding of prediction that include the probability and regression as well. Next, we'll be looking at chapter 2, that is data preparation. In this chapter, we'll be looking at a number of outlines. First, the logging of the data, then the data accuracy control, then the database structure, entering data to the computer if you are actually dealing with a digital form for your data, and finally, of course, the data transformation. So in the first logging of the data, we're going to be looking at different approaches where your data can be logged using either mail or code or actually any kind of digital software that help you to do so. It's not always possible or actually the right way to write your data on a physical paper, but usually we use a digital actually means to do so. And then we'll be looking at the accuracy control of your data. How could you make sure that the data has been stored already? We'll be looking at different approaches to make sure that the accuracy control is in there. Then we'll be moving to the database structure, which is a very, very important subject. Once you start actually to put your data in a structured way, are you going to use a specific kind of database? How about if you don't have a background in IT or computer engineering? What alternative that you can work on? All these will be discussed in this outline. And then we'll be moving to the entering data in a computer. As we said, we're not going to use a physical means to store our data or to write what kind of information we collected from the subject, but we use a digital means. So we're going to be looking at different techniques of entering data to your computer. And of course, finally, we'll be looking at the transformation. This is the time where you're going to have a different aspect of transforming the data to a different form. After that, we'll be moving to chapter 3, that is descriptive analysis. I think from here onwards, the previous two chapters were much more likely as a quick introduction to the idea of analysis and what you need to understand. But now actually we started at this point to touch the basic element of analysis, first by understanding descriptive analysis. So first we'll be looking at the EDA or the exploratory data analysis, and then the distribution, central tendency, dispersion, a bivariate and multivariate descriptive. So first, we're going to be looking introduction to the EDA. What does EDA mean? In general idea. And you could see here, I have written in a red color something many material missed to actually elaborate. And that is a probability has nothing to do in here, because most of the books, especially in the academic arena, they understand the statistics usually with the probability. But as soon as I'm going to prove my point that probability actually has nothing to do with the statistics or analysis, probability is actually a branch of a prediction and at the first place. That's why in this book you will see that I do not speak about probability at all, and you shouldn't. All what we do here is analysis, actually creating that analytical model. So next we'll be discussing the first element of actually analysis or descriptive analysis, and that is to understand distribution. You see, in the distribution part, there are a number of sub-outlines. The general introductory on that, and then the mass distribution, which is the first kind of distribution once you have a specific type of data. As later you will see that there are type of data. So one of them will be following kind of a mass distribution, and the other one will be following a density kind of distribution. So you will have a clear idea on the meaning of distribution as the first element of descriptive model. Then we'll be looking at the second important element of descriptive analysis, that is the central tendency of your data. As you could see here, first I'm going to introduce you to the concept of central tendency. Then we'll be looking at the first element of central tendency, that is the mean, and then of course the median, and then you have the mood, and finally the proportion. After that, we'll be looking at the dispersion. This is the third important element of descriptive analysis. And as we said, we're going to have a quick introduction on that. Then we'll be looking at their element like the range, the interquartile, the variance, and finally the standard deviation. Now, up to this point, as you have finished all three important elements of making your descriptive analysis, you will be able actually to create your first univariate analysis on the data, that is to discuss a specific variable. Next, we'll be moving to the bivariate descriptive analysis, which is in this, of course, we're going to be discussing all the element of a bivariate. That means you have two variables that you are trying to build descriptive analysis on them. And finally, of course, you will be ready to create your multivariate descriptive. Then we move to chapter 4, inferential analysis. Now, descriptive analysis has been done. You have actually created a sort of model that give you a general idea on the analysis part by graphing also and stuff of tabling things. But now you need to make an inferential. That's why in this chapter we'll be looking quick introduction on the idea, then estimating parameters, and finally hypothesis testing. So first we'll be looking at a quick introduction on inferential descriptive, which is the second pillar actually, just in combination with the meaning of descriptive analysis. So we're going to have a quick introduction. Next, we'll be moving to estimating parameters. This is the first element of inferential. In estimating parameters, there are two important sublines. First, we'll be looking at the meaning of point estimate, and then we'll be looking at an interval estimate. Then we'll be moving to the hypothesis testing. I think this is a very, very crucially important part of doing the final spot of doing analysis on your data, is actually to understand how to do the hypothesis testing, because previously we have learned how to hypothesize something. In the previous book we discussed a different idea of hypothesis, but here actually we're going to test that kind of hypothesis. So we're going to have a quick introductory on that, and then we'll be looking at some factors that actually control the idea of hypothesis, and finally we will be looking at the roadmap. But before the roadmap, I'm going to share with you actually a kind of a graphing mechanism that I have come to put all together in order to make the right testing at the right time, because later you will understand depends on the kind of the data. Is it continuous or discrete? And then depends on the sample and the purpose, and finally what kind of a test you're looking at. So here I walk you through these two important pages where you should appreciate by then that whatever kind of research you have come from, picking up the right kind of a test is a crucial in order to prove or to introduce actually the right kind of conclusion to your research. So this is the actual roadmap here, but the previous 2 pages actually the actual practical implementation on them. Next, we'll be moving to chapter 5, that is statistical software. Now, you have done all the actual work, and now it is your time to use specific tools that does this job for you, because having you to choose the right test, having you to choose the exact mechanism of the right statistical model and how you're going to do the analysis on the central tendency, the dispersion, etc. But actually you need a software to do that, or you need a kind of a digital tool that help you. That's why first we're going to look in this chapter at a quick introduction on the idea of statistical software, and then we'll be looking at the statistical software we choose for that, and finally we'll do the lab implementation. So first, as we said in the introduction, we'll be looking at the idea of a statistical software, and then we'll be looking at number of available tools that are there. Depends on, of course, they are open source, public domain, etc. But in our case here, we're going to be looking at Jamovi, and Jamovi is an open source statistical software that actually done most of the job that we would like to execute. But the point is that we are using this tool. We are not actually relying by random, well, I would like to do this kind of test. So we provide the tool with the data that we have, and then we say execute this kind of test. But the point is that we know what is the right test to do. And finally, of course, we're going to be looking at the lab implementation. In this lab implementation, I will walk you through the entire idea of Jamovi, how to use it, and what kind of actually exercise that you can do. And also we'll be exploring 2 different projects. They are actually just illustrative on the idea of doing analysis. Finally, here we go. We come back to our lab section 3. So if you have already accomplished the first book research from the start to the end, you should remember that we have accomplished the first 2 labs. And this is the last lab concerning the project that we have actually worked on from the very beginning. So in this chapter, first we'll have a quick review on what we have accomplished previously, and then we'll start EDA on the project, and finally the inferential analysis. So as I said, essentially we will have a quick review, just if you missed to go for the first book, which I do recommend highly for you to go for the first book and really to understand the essential idea of research and the lab that we have accomplished, the first and the second. That's why here actually what you see at the bottom of the screen, all the things that we accomplished previously. And then we will start our EDA on the data. So now every academic information we've learned previously in this book, it will be implemented here, because now we have real data and we have things to actually do the analysis on. And finally, we'll be doing the inferential on that to answer our research questions. So you could see here the EDA and the inferential, which is the most important part of analysis, is going to be done here. And finally, I'm going to share with you the AISS v2.10. This actually map or a framework that I have created myself throughout years of experience. It shows you exactly the entire idea from research to the analysis part. Actually include portion of the idea of prediction in this particular box. So you would be having a good idea on the details of this map at your disposal. So by the end of this book, you should be able now to say your product or final solution, it's actually built, and the conclusion you've come up with, or the solution you are proposing, or the answer to the research question based on scientific foundation, because you have followed the research correctly. You have established the right strategy, and you have done all the right kind of analysis, the testing, etc., etc. So as we said before, basically in this part, the past that has been settled and understood, and the present is actually been answered. The present will be actually the answer for your research question. It will be the face of your product, as we said. Now, if you like to continue, as we said before, to the future part, which is actually is not included up to this point in the final answer of the product, this is the time where you might want to check the third book, and that is Prediction from the Start to the End. But up to this point, I would like to thank you for participating in this program. And I hope that you have come to benefit from the materials and that something have contributed to your endeavor. So stay tuned for any upcoming materials. Otherwise, you'd like to continue with the last two elements of this book, feel free to join them. Thank you very much. Cheers.